Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Daisy. Today I will be reading my subscribers' spooky stories. So let's get cozy, grab your snacks, grab your cobija, and let's get straight into it. Hi, my name is Nina, and I'm from Houston, Texas. I have plenty of stories I could share, but the most recent one has really opened my mind to believing in spirits and ghosts. The house in question was built in the 1960s and has had a few owners over the years. The prior tenants lived there for about 10 years. I have always had vivid dreams, heard my name being called, and even seen spirits growing up. But this story is by far the scariest. My husband and I moved into the rental home in June 2024, just the two of us and our dog. During the initial walkthrough, before we decided to rent the place, I could immediately sense an uneasy feeling throughout the house. It's a 3-bedroom home, and in one of the bedrooms, the previous tenants had left behind an oval-shaped mirror. As soon as I saw it, I told my husband, "I don't like the way that mirror looks. We need to remove it." But he didn't want to because he liked it and he planned to turn that room into his gaming room. After we moved in, we decided to sleep in the living room for the first week while we fixed up the house. We painted the rooms, installed new flooring, and took care of some TLC since the owner allowed us to move in early in exchange for handling the updates ourselves. During that first week, I had trouble sleeping in the living room. I constantly felt like someone was staring at us. The house originally had an old brown color scheme, which made it feel incredibly gloomy. After a few weeks, we finally settled in and moved everything into the rooms. We had a guest room, and the other room was going to be my husband's game room. I started to notice little things happening here and there, like the eerie feeling of being watched. One day, we were in the living room and I was sleeping. Suddenly, I heard a loud pop. I turned around and saw that the light bulb had popped, but it was just the plastic part of the bulb. It was one of those LED lights. I told my husband and he said, "That's normal." I replied, "No, it's not." Well, a few weeks later, my husband got a call that his sister was in town and wanted to see him. A little backstory. My husband came to the US by himself from Venezuela through Mexico about 4 years ago. He is the youngest in a family of 6 and hadn't seen his sister in over 10 years. Seeing her was a big deal for him as it had been so long, and he was thrilled to know he had now family nearby. That Wednesday night, we drove out to Baytown, Texas, about 25 minutes from where we live, to see her and her boys. A few days later, I mentioned to my sister-in-law that she should come stay with us. We had 2 extra rooms and would love the company. I'm very big on family and love helping when I can. Losing my grandpa in 2018 taught me the value of life and to never take a moment for granted. Well, they came over that same night, and since I was off the next day, a Friday, we planned to go job hunting for her so she could find something close to our house. That morning, as we were getting into my car, my nephew suddenly said, "Look, that wasn't there last night." I walked around to the truck and saw a dead cat curled up in a ball. I was shocked and thought, "What the heck? That's odd." I didn't think much of it at the time and let it be. But that was just the beginning of strange things happening in the house. Later, we were sitting in the living room watching a movie when one of the picture frames, a photo of my husband and me, fell straight down off the wall. We turned and looked at each other, confused, like, what was that? I was freaking out, but again, my husband brushed it off, saying, "You probably didn't hang it up correctly." I know the thumbtack was put in all the way. The weird thing was that the thumbtack wasn't broken or moved. Normally, if something is hung improperly or too heavy for the tack, it will either fall out or break, but this one didn't. Everything was still intact. After this incident, one of my nephews started acting out and getting unusually angry. My sister-in-law would take away his phone, but his behavior would escalate. He acted as though someone was harming him and would become uncontrollably mad. One night, we sat with him in his room to talk and figure out what was wrong, asking him why he was acting that way. When I looked at him, his face didn't look like his own. He looked like an older man, filled with anger. It was unsettling. The next day, everyone was at work and my nephews were home alone. I work just 2 minutes from the house, so I'm never far from them. The boys are 15 and 12 years old. I had set up cameras in the living room temporarily, as we hadn't yet mounted them outside. That afternoon, my husband called me and said, "The boys are scared." He explained that he saw motion on the living room camera, and when he checked it, the boys told him they were in their room watching TV when they heard 3 knocks on the closet door. Then, the doorknob started moving as if someone was trying to open it. I got on the cameras and told them, grab the camera from the kitchen and place it in the room. About 3 hours later, I started getting motion alerts from the room. Curious and concerned, I reviewed the footage. What I was about to see on the footage was beyond anything I could have expected. I captured 3 separate images from the motion detection, and one of them showed a face in the corner of the room. I'll attach photos. I didn't even know how to explain what I was seeing. I was in total shock. While all of this was happening, I started noticing that my husband and his oldest nephew were starting to clash more often. They were bumping heads about almost everything. Concerned, I talked to my mother-in-law. She lit candles and prayed to the archangels while I told her everything that had been going on in the house. She explained that my husband has a white protective light, but our nephew has a black light surrounding him, a lot of negative energy, and that something may be attached to him. One evening, my husband, my sister-in-law, and I were sitting with our nephew, talking, laughing, trying to keep the mood light. We were joking around and being silly. At one point, my sister-in-law said, "Okay, I'm hungry. I'm going to the kitchen to cook." We had been cleaning the boys' room earlier, so my vanity chair was temporarily placed in front of the restroom door, with my Oculus and its controllers sitting on top of it. As my sister-in-law walked through the hallway, one of the Oculus controllers was suddenly thrown in the direction she was walking. We all heard the sound of the controller hitting the floor. My husband was standing in the hallway near our bedroom door, and my nephew was sitting against the wall. Both of them saw the controller get thrown, but all of us heard it. I got up scared and asked, "What happened?" When I reached the hallway, the controller was still on the floor, slightly moving from the fall. As I looked up, I noticed that the same picture frame that had fallen earlier was now moving again. Things started happening more often. Doors would close on their own, and at night, we could hear the sound of someone walking through the house. There was always a black shadow in the living room, sitting on the sofa. My dog began sleeping with the boys to give them comfort, while our kitten, which we had gotten around the time my sister-in-law and her sons moved in, slept with us. We had also installed an alarm system, placing sensors on all the doors and windows for extra security. However, on the very first night, the alarm went off without any explanation. Fast forward to the beginning of July, we experienced a storm/hurricane, and we were without power for 3 days. Following my suegra's advice, I went to a herberia to get sage so I could cleanse the house and everyone in it. Since we didn't have power, I opened all the windows and started saging the house. As I went through each room, I prayed while saging the corners. When I entered the kids' room, I was in the corner where I had previously captured the figure on the camera. While praying and saging that spot, I suddenly felt something scratching the back of my legs. Startled, I turned around and saw my cat sitting calmly in the doorway. I immediately told my husband, "We need to remove that mirror from the kids' room. I don't want it in the house." He finally agreed and removed the mirror. Things have calmed down a lot since we removed the mirror. Every now and then, the lights still flicker, movements can be heard, and shadows are occasionally seen, but nothing too scary. That's until a few weeks ago, my husband went to drop his sister off at her friend's house, about 25 minutes away. It was just our younger nephew and me at home while everyone else was out. The house was calm and everything seemed fine. My husband and his brother-in-law returned to the house around 9:20 p.m. They were only there for about 3 minutes when my husband told me, "We're going to the store to get ice and some drinks for tomorrow so we don't have to stop in the morning." While they were gone, I decided to go inside and use the restroom before they got back. Not even 2 minutes after I went into the restroom, I heard someone knocking very hard on our back door. Our dog started barking like crazy. I screamed out for my nephew and asked him, "Is someone knocking on the door?" The camera in the living room caught my nephew walking toward the front door, but the knocks continued. He quickly ran back to his room. I stayed in the restroom, terrified, and called my husband. "Are you home already?" I asked him. He replied, "No. Why?" My heart dropped. Someone is knocking on the back door. Less than a minute later, he arrived, checked the entire house, and found nothing. Nothing had been moved near the back door, and no one was there. When we walked inside, he asked, "What happened?" We explained everything to him, but we were still shaking from the experience. I couldn't sleep that night. We've also heard our names being called from the other rooms, but we've learned not to respond. I have many other stories to share. I hope you enjoy it and I'm able to share more stories. Thank you for your time. Regards, Karina. We have a little visitor, so he's just going to be here until he wants to leave. He's just gonna hop off randomly. I know it. So, let's get to it. Hi Daisy, I go by Rosalina. After listening to other subscriber stories, I wanted to share my first paranormal encounter with you. Many people might find this story hard to believe, as I personally feel I had a telepathic conversation with an entity. This is a rather long story because the experience left me somewhat traumatized, and I remember many of the details vividly, including the specifics of the conversation. This encounter took place in 2019. I was in San Diego, California, staying at Wyndham Bayside Hotel with my then boyfriend. We were set to stay at the hotel for 4 days before embarking on a cruise to Mexico. We stayed in one of the rooms in Tower 2. While I don't remember the exact room number, I do recall that it was on the 6th or 7th floor. From the moment we walked into the room, I felt a distinct presence. It was as though we had walked in on someone who was already there. But of course, no one else was in the room, just my boyfriend and me. Sorry guys, he wanted to leave. So now onto the story. Over the next few days, that feeling never went away. It constantly felt like there was an additional person in the room with us, watching us closely. I became uneasy and decided to investigate. I checked for cameras in the TVs, lights, mirrors, and the bathroom. There was none. I looked under the bed and even placed a chair under the doorknob of the second door in the room. Still, nothing. On the third day, while we were in the room, I finally brought it up to my boyfriend. I don't know if it's just me, but have you also felt like someone is watching us? I feel like we're being watched. He wasn't someone who believed in the paranormal or superstition, so he dismissed it, saying he didn't feel anything and that it was just me. I shrugged it off and tried to ignore the feeling as we went about the rest of our day. But later that night, whatever had been watching us must have heard me, because it decided to make its presence known. Later that night, before I experienced sleep paralysis, I was dreaming. I barely remember the dream itself, but one detail stood out vividly. I dreamt that I was running through a hall of mirrors, and the mirrors were draped with red velvet curtains. I don't know why that specific part of the dream stayed with me. Maybe it was my mind trying to rationalize what happened next. I woke up lying on my side and immediately fell into sleep paralysis. Before I continue, I need to provide some additional context. The hotel is situated in the middle of downtown San Diego. Even with the lights off, the glow of the city outside illuminated the room in a dark blue hue. The bed was large enough to fit 3 or 4 people lying side by side. My boyfriend, who is 6 feet tall, could comfortably lay on it without his feet dangling off the edge. This detail becomes important because during my sleep paralysis, my vision split into 2 points of view. One was from my perspective, frozen in place and staring at the wall while lying on my side. The second was an aerial view of our bed. In the aerial view, I could see both of us lying there, our backs facing each other with a considerable distance between us. The two perspectives kept flipping back and forth. When the view flipped to the ceiling for the third time, I wanted to scream. A dark, cloudy mass loomed in the space between my boyfriend and me. This cloud was tall, just as tall as him, if not taller. Slowly, it began to morph from a massive black cloud into the shape of a person. It draped one arm over my side, inching closer. The aerial view persisted until its voice echoed through my head. It began with a simple, "Hello." The voice wasn't singular. It was an array of voices combined into one. The most prominent voice was that of a younger man, likely someone in their mid to late 20s. Even though I couldn't close my eyes, I pretended to be asleep. Then it spoke again. "You're awake. I know you can sense me." My heart began pounding in my chest, and an overwhelming sense of fear swept over me. I had always believed that spiritual beings and ghosts couldn't physically harm a person, but some part of me felt like this particular entity was different, capable of causing harm. This entity clarified that it was surprised I had been able to sense its presence for as long as I did, and assured me that it would not hurt me. However, it stated that it wanted to hurt my boyfriend. I refused, firmly telling it that I would not allow it to harm him. It responded coldly, saying there was nothing I could do to change its mind, and that it had only warned me because it felt like doing so. At that moment, I began to recite the Lord's Prayer. As I did, I felt fingers slowly digging into my lower back. I still couldn't move my body. The entity spoke again, saying the prayer was more of an annoyance to them, but not because it caused any harm. It reiterated that it didn't want to hurt me, but added ominously that it could change its mind if it wanted to. That's when I thought to myself, if I was reciting the Lord's Prayer, shouldn't that have been enough to scare it away or weaken its hold on me? So why wasn't it leaving? I stopped reciting the prayer and asked the entity why it wanted to hurt him. It refused to give me an explanation, simply stating that it didn't like him. However, it added that it liked me, and for that reason would not harm me, at least for the time being. Desperate, I asked it to at least tell me when it planned to act. The entity responded in a chilling, drawn-out tone. "Right about now." As if on cue, my boyfriend suddenly began screaming, a blood-curdling scream, and flailing wildly beside me in the bed. At that moment, I regained control of my body, just enough to cover my ears and curl up, trying to shield myself from his erratic movements. As this was happening, I heard laughter echoing in my head, growing more distant with each passing moment. My initial instinct was to freeze, but then I thought, for all I knew, he could be getting attacked right now, and I might be next. I turned over and saw him cradling his leg, his back still facing me. After a moment, he seemed to relax, and through a tired haze, muttered that he had a Charlie horse cramp. As soon as the pain subsided, he immediately fell back to sleep. When the room finally fell silent again, I glanced at my phone. It was 2:08 a.m. Not exactly the witching hour, but close enough. I wanted to believe it was all just a coincidence, that he began screaming at the exact moment the entity said the pain would occur, right about now. I also wanted to think that it was some elaborate prank orchestrated by him, but if it were a prank, how could I have been completely lucid, responding to statements in my mind while frozen? And how could it be a coincidence that I was told exactly when he would be hurt? I told my boyfriend about my experience the next morning. Although he was normally a skeptic when it came to the paranormal, this was the one time he seemed inclined to believe me. We left that morning for the cruise. As we were leaving the room, I still could feel that invisible presence watching us, but it did not follow us out. Whatever it was had chosen to stay behind, and I haven't had a similar experience since. If I'm being honest, part of me wants to return to fully investigate what exactly reached out to me, but to avoid being traumatized again, maybe it's for the best that I never find out what it was. Hi Daisy, I'm David. My story takes place in Northeast Los Angeles in Highland Park. I grew up on Fayette Street in an apartment building that was built in the 1990s. Since the age of 5, I walked to and from school, as my school was just around the block. One day, when I was in 4th grade at the age of 9, my mom called my grandma to walk over to our unit to make sure she had turned off the coffee maker. My mom was always in a hurry to get to work and had a habit of leaving the TV on or the fridge open. She was one of those people. As for me, I loved school. I never missed a day and was always on time. My grandma also lived in the building and was the manager, so she had the keys to every unit. My grandma walked over, let herself into our apartment, and noticed that the coffee maker was indeed on. Before leaving, she heard a noise coming from my bedroom and saw a boy. She described him as wearing a white polo, black shorts, and black sneakers, just like my school uniform. He was pale with black hair combed over and holding my Mickey Mouse toy, a toy I had treasured since I was 5 years old. She spoke to him, asking, "Güero, ¿por qué no fuiste a la escuela? Güero, why didn't you go to school?" Everyone called me Güero because of how pale I am. Well, there was no reply from the boy, so she assumed I was ignoring her because I was upset about missing school. Using her phone, she called my mom and asked, "Why isn't David at school?" My mom replied, "David left for school at 7:30. My grandma then said, "Está mirando por la ventana, triste, como si preferiría estar en la escuela." He's looking out the window, sad, as if he would rather be at school. That's when it hit her. It wasn't me she was talking to. It was a ghost. Still, there was no reaction from the boy. My grandma slowly backed out of the room, hung up on my mom without saying another word, locked the door, and went back to her apartment. 1 year later, when I was 10 and in 5th grade, I got up to pee one night. As I climbed back into bed, I had the sudden urge to open my eyes and look at the door. When I did, I saw the boy. He was wearing my school uniform and holding my Mickey Mouse toy. I thought I was dreaming. He looked identical to me. I wasn't scared. In fact, he waved at me and smiled. I waved back and then went back to sleep. 8 years later, when I finished high school, we bought a house and were finally moving out of the building. We filled our U-Haul truck and were about to leave when my mom told my stepdad to wait. She said she had forgotten something. She pulled a suitcase out of the U-Haul and took out my Mickey Mouse toy, which I hadn't seen in years. She carried it back into the apartment and left it in my old, now empty room. Now I'm 33, and I never thought much of it. I assumed she was giving the toy to some kid in the building. However, I recently found out from my mom that that Mickey Mouse toy had been mysteriously moving around the apartment when I was at school. Sometimes from my bed to the living room or to the bathroom or even to the kitchen. She was never scared. She always believed the ghost just wanted to play. Today, I feel bad for the boy. I hope he's found peace. I did some research and discovered that a building had burned down on that site in the 1980s due to kids playing with matches. The archives don't confirm any deaths, but I can't shake the feeling that the boy may have died in that fire. Thanks for reading, Daisy. Feel free to use the names and street details in case anyone wants to check out the building. Hi Daisy, my name is Monica. I just recently started listening to you, and my 9-year-old daughter Emma just started listening too. She says hi, by the way. She's been insisting that I email you my stories, so here we are. Hi Monica, hi Emma. Thank you both for listening to the stories. It's all thanks to you guys, seriously. So thank you Emma for encouraging your mother. Now we get to hear more stories from viewers like you. I sound like PBS. From viewers like you. Thank you. No, seriously. Thank you both so much. I can't wait to share your stories. So let's go on. Now, about my stories. In 2006, we had just moved into a brand new home, and my baby sister and I shared a room. One night, I woke up feeling cold and noticed that the cobija, the blanket, had slipped down to my feet. Así que me levanté y me volví a cobijar. So I got up and covered myself again. Seconds later, the blanket was yanked off of me. I asked my sister, "Sis, was that you?" But she did not respond. So I got up again and pulled the blanket back over me. No pues, otra vez, alguien me volvió a quitar la cobija. Well, again, someone pulled the blanket off of me. I stood up and shook my sister, asking if she was awake, but she was sound asleep. She made a small movement, but didn't wake up. So I pulled the blanket back on, and once again, it was yanked down to my legs. This time though, I felt something moist, like someone was breathing between my ear and neck. Keeping my eyes closed, I pulled the cobija up to my chin. I don't remember how long it took me to fall back asleep after that. Another encounter happened after I graduated from high school and had a day off. I had the whole house to myself since my family was either at work or school. I was in the living room watching TV when all of a sudden, I heard kids laughing, like they were running around behind the sofa and down the hallway. I wasn't scared. I was surprisingly okay with it. Between the time we moved in and when I graduated, we had inquilinos, tenants, who rented out the master bedroom. When they first came to see the room, my parents introduced us. The man asked if there were any more kids in the house, and my parents said no. That's when he mentioned, "No tengan miedo, pero hay 2 pequeños más en esta casa. La verdad, no son malos. Don't be afraid, but there are 2 little ones here. They're not bad, honestly." This next story is from my sister-in-law, and it happened years later. One morning while we were getting breakfast ready, she asked if the house was haunted. My mom asked why, and she told us that she had woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of the office chair spinning. She saw a little boy using the chair, and when it stopped spinning, the boy was facing her. I don't remember all the details, but this encounter happened in the same room where my cobija was pulled off of me. I eventually told my mom about the blanket incident, and she said that maybe the ghost was trying to lead me to gold or money. She also told me, "Nunca le tengas miedo a los muertos, sino a los vivos. Never be afraid of the dead, only the living." My last spooky story I would like to share is about an experience my parents had with La Llorona. While they were in Morelia, Michoacan, Mexico, they ended up sleeping at one of my dad's sister's homes. My mom told me that she and my dad couldn't sleep and were staying up talking when all of a sudden they heard someone weeping. The sound was so loud and horrific that it felt like it was right next to them. In the end, they slept with the lights on. It's worth noting that my aunt's home was near a river, and supposedly, where there's a river nearby, you're more likely to hear La Llorona. With tons of love, your new YouTube subscribers, Emma and Monica. So that was it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to everyone that shared in their spooky stories. Your stories never get old. I can read these stories all day if I could. So please keep them coming. I was thinking maybe for the month of December, if you have a spooky December Christmas story that you have, If you'd like to share with us, feel free to send it at daicyspooks@gmail.com. I can't wait to hear those. But I hope you guys like the Christmas theme that we have going on here. Perfect to just drink your hot chocolate, just get in the holiday spirit. But I hope you guys stay safe in these holiday times, and I hope to see you guys all in my next one. Bye.